You. Sorry about that little technical hitch there at the beginning. So welcome to today's webinar, The Uncomfortable Truth About Stress. My name is Michelle MacArthur Morgan and I'm one of the senior learning consultants with Jigsaw Discovery. And my kind of background, just to give you a little bit of a feel for those of you who don't know me, I spent the first 20 some years of my career working in the hospitality sector and working very long hours and across all the kind of various roles within that sector. Whilst working in hotels, I actually, through chance actually, got interested in behaviour and psychology and understanding more about being human. And actually the opportunity to study with the Open University and did my first degree in psychology. I then latterly, over the last 20 or so years, have spent most of my time, I left the hospitality sector and moved into the learning and development sector, again having gone back to university and did my professional qualifications there. And so I've spent the last 20 years working around behaviour and researching and attending programmes, my own personal development around understanding more about not only the psychology but also the neuroscience behind it and what we call the applied brain science, applying it to the workplace. I've also for the last 20, about 5 years now, had my own mindful practice and for the last 10 years or so have been teaching other people mindfulness and how to develop their own mindful practice. So that's just a little bit about myself. In the true spirit of the of well-being and what this webinar is about today, what I'd just like you to do is very quickly, just in chat, just put a number between 1 and 6, which reflects how you're feeling today. 1 being tired, not particularly great, fed up, stressed, frustrated, and 6 being really energized, top of the world, mentally refreshed, ready to take on absolutely anything physically and mentally. Brilliant. So we've got a whole range starting to come through there. A 6 in there even, brilliant. Most people somewhere between that 2, 3, 4s, 3s and 4s seems to be the kind of average. A few 5s, this is brilliant, excellent. Great to see it all there. That's lovely. Well, what we like to do is to encourage people just to take this time. And this is something that we should all be doing on a regular basis. Is just taking just a few moments to check in with ourselves and ask ourselves that question. How am I feeling right here, right now at this point? What's going on for me? And it's a really good practice to actually just get into, is to step back for that, as I say, just for a moment or two really, and just check in with yourself. How are you feeling today? So looking at the agenda for today, during the session, the kind of things that we're going to be looking at is why many people worry about and find it very difficult to manage stress. Why is it difficult to actually manage? And then I want to look at some of the real causes of stress and answer that question, what the uncomfortable truth around stress. And then move on to looking at the kind of the key to living a more stress-free life. And the key to that is through understanding more about our behavioural preferences and ourselves and having increased self-awareness so that we can develop personalised coping strategies based upon our preferences. As we go through the session today, if you do have any questions, please put them in the questions panel, the questions tab, and we'll try and address those questions at the end. If you struggle to find the questions tab, if for any reason you can't access it, then please, you can also pop them in the chat and we'll try and keep an eye on that as well. The one question we always get asked is, will the recording be available? Yes, it will be available. Probably within, well, certainly within the next 48 hours, maybe later tomorrow at some point it will be available. And you will receive an email with a link on, so that if you do want to rewatch it, re-listen to it, then by all means you can do. So I want to just start, and we're all used to this saying now, we're going to start with the data, start with the science, just to put things into context. Not that many of us actually need convincing of the severity or importance of the situation or of managing stress at the moment, certainly. So these are some figures which were published by the HSE in November last year. And you can see that sharp rise in numbers, which we know has continued to rise since these figures were collated. In the UK in 2018-19, 44% of all work-related illness reported was due to stress and anxiety and depression. By 2019-20, that had risen to 51%, which is a huge rise in just 1 year. And again, there's no doubt that when the 2021 figures are published, there'll be a further significant rise. In June of last year, 80% of people felt that their mental health was significantly worse whilst working from home. And 85% of the UK workforce reported being worried about being able to actually manage their stress levels. And that was according to, I think it was People Management, that actually appeared in. In 2017, Deloitte published what is known as the Stevenson-Farmer report, which estimated that the total cost of per employee, of poor mental health was between £1,794 to £2,565 per employee per year. So in effect, in a team of 10 employees, the cost of poor mental health would be between £18,000 to £25,000 a year. Last week, Deloitte updated that data, and they reported that there had been an increase of 16% on the 2017 figures. So that means that the cost of poor mental health in a team of 10 now is between £21,000 and £29,000 a year. However, there is some good news that came out of the report also. And they actually reported that organisations who invested in mental health interventions actually showed a return of 5 to 1. For every £1 invested, they got gained a return of £5. Now, they also found that organisations who invested in early interventions, so we're actually more proactive rather than waiting for people to become stressed and to start taking time off work due to mental health issues, by being proactive and looking at organisation-wide culture changes and education, could actually see a return of up to 8 to 1. So £8 return on every pound invested. So we can see there's a real business case there for actually investing in our employee well-being, and stress being a very big part of that. Stress is described by the World Health Organization as the health epidemic of the 21st century. And experts believe it can contribute to serious life-threatening diseases such as diabetes, dementia, heart disease. So what I'd just like to ask you now is, again, using chat, if you could just pop in there some of the things that cause stress for you. What are your stressors? I'll just give you a couple of minutes. So just in chat, what are some of the things that cause you stress? Okay, so we've got a whole load of things coming through there. One of the things, when you do put things in chat, it's usually, if you can just make sure that it goes to everyone, attendees and panelists, then everybody could actually see it. But actually some of the things that's coming in here: tight deadlines, not being in control, a caring role and not getting things done, family, lack of time, poor planning, poor bandwidth, absolutely. Yeah, I've got fingers and toes crossed at the moment today. Clients not keeping to their side of a project, people promising and not delivering on time, family, worries about work, money, technology, difficult relationships, unexplained last-minute changes, uncertainty, homeschooling, looking too far into the future, children, work, change, children. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got some real kind of, your wife has Alzheimer's and behaviour and my behaviour, absolutely. Worry about job sustainability and also loss of communication and interaction. Okay, brilliant. So thank you very much for sharing all of that. COVID, yeah, all of the above, homeschooling, people not doing what you expect them to do, and recognising that I've not been appropriately clear in my request. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my partner. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so thank you very much for sharing all of that. So, what I want to know though, and question, and we'll just ask you to ponder on for just a moment is, are these the real sources of stress? Are these the things that are really causing you stress? Most people think that stress does come from the enormous pressures and responsibilities of life. All the things that you've kind of put there, working from home, pandemic, finances, family, partners, loss of control, not having sufficient resources, not having enough time, high workloads, money, etc. And that's what we tend to think of as the things that actually stress us. In short, it's when the things in life just aren't going to plan or as smoothly as we want them to be. And for most of us, it's a pretty long list at the moment. Since everyone around us seems to be experiencing life as being stressful, we tend to resign ourselves to the fact that that's life at the moment. That's what life is like, living and working, existing in the 21st century. And we accept that that's just the way it is. Actually, it's not true. And the uncomfortable truth about stress is that it's not your boss, your kids, your partner, your finances, the working from home, the workloads. They aren't actually the real causes of stress. They are not stressful. That's not to say that stress doesn't exist or that stress isn't very real. And you may well find that practicing yoga, exercising, meditation, relaxation, etc. may help to relieve the effects of stress. But what tends to happen, that relief is just for a few short hours. And hours or possibly the next day, those stresses return. But the real source of stress is not those surface situations we tend to blame. The real source of stress and the uncomfortable truth about stress is that actually the real source is our thoughts. And the only way of eliminating stress, or distress actually as it should be referred to, the unhelpful stress, because stress can be healthy as well. There is good stress, eustress, and we need a certain level of stress to actually motivate us. Without it, we wouldn't survive. Stress is our inner superhero. But when we get too much pressure, when pressure builds up and our stress builds up and it becomes too much, it then turns to what is actually known as distress, although when most people talk about stress, they're actually talking about distress. So the only real way to actually eliminate that stress, to reduce that stress, to take it away completely, is to actually, and this is the bad stress I'm talking about, the distress, is to actually really understand our thoughts, what's going on in our head, and the drivers behind our way of thinking. Only then can we really start to strategically address the real source of stress. So the key to eliminating that distress and not just managing it is to create a fundamental and lasting shift in the way that we actually think. The first step to this strategic shift is to generate insights into our behavioural preferences and the way we perceive the world around us. From there, we can then start to understand the drivers of our thoughts and develop our own unique coping strategies. based on those behavioural preferences. I can see from looking at the list of people that's actually on the call today that some of the people that are here have either worked with Jigsaw Discovery or are actually licensees of the Jigsaw Discovery tool. So they will have an understanding and an awareness. So please bear with me just for a few moments till we just kind of look at the Jigsaw Discovery so that everybody can take part today. So the Jigsaw Discovery tool is a behavioural discovery profiling tool and behavioural framework, and it's based on 3 axes: thinking and feeling, intuition and sensing, introversion and extroversion. There are 4 basic behavioural styles, and we are all a unique combination of those styles. And by doing and creating your own behavioural map with the Jigsaw profiling tool, you can actually start to see your own unique combination of those styles. And we can actually, people can start to understand more then about their behaviours, about their thinking, and learn how they can navigate their way around the map and through the world that surrounds them. We actually have, as I say, 4 behavioural styles, and ours are actually given character names. And our first character, behavioural preference, is what we call the ever ready. So this is very much an action-orientated behavioural style. They like to be occupied with work that has a sense of achievement, quite focused, determined people, and they value other people based on their competency. Can't say the word, competency and ability to actually achieve. People that have a high preference in the ever ready area come across as quite blunt, direct speaking individuals and can be seen by others as quite impatient. So for the purposes of the session today, I'm going to use the example, the stressor of having a high workload, because that's a situation or a stress that many people can actually relate to. So someone with an ever-ready behavioural preference, you may think, well, if they thrive on challenge and being stretched, and they actually live life in a fast lane, they like a fast pace, they like to get things done, then probably they won't actually find having a high workload stressful at all. However, by having that deeper understanding and awareness of the preference, then we can start to understand why an ever ready may still show signs of stress and experience those feelings of stress when they do have a high workload. Any thoughts? Again, please pop them in chat. Any thoughts what you think might actually stress somebody who has a high preference for this ever ready behavioural style? What might stress them about having a high workload? Just give you a moment, just see if you want to pop anything in there. Again, if you can make sure it's attendees and panellists. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got lots of good things coming in there. You can read them yourself. They're all to the kind of attendees as well. Absolutely. So, the real cause of stress then is not the actual volume of work. It occurs when the individual cannot see how the work is aligned to their goals or targets and things which are important to them. So, when this isn't clear, they think that their time is being wasted, and one of the real source of stress for an ever ready is wastage of time, wastage of resources. So if they cannot clearly see how the work is aligned to their targets or goals, if they cannot clearly see, oh, what's in it for me, then their thinking will be around what a waste of time this is. And that is where the real source of stress starts to occur. Because if they had a similar volume of work, which was clearly aligned to their goals, they'd be much more motivated and actually not stressed or distressed at all by it. They'd be motivated. It would be the eustress, the good stress, that was actually motivating them on. So once the thought driving that feeling of stress has been identified, then it's possible to develop a strategy to actually eliminate that stress. So how do we do that? Well, for our ever-readies, if you actually manage an ever-ready by being aware of their behavioural preferences and potential way that they are thinking, you can actually frame the way you present the workload to them. You can make sure that you clearly demonstrate how the work will help them to achieve their targets or their goals. They may be personal, professional or business goals. It could well be by doing some work that they perceive on the surface not to be worthy of their time. It might be an opportunity for them to actually develop or demonstrate their abilities, their capabilities that would look good when it comes to their next promotion. Again, if you're the manager, you could also perhaps question, why are you giving this work to them in particular? Are they the best person for the work? Why is it important that they actually do it? And let them know why you actually have picked them to do that work. Play to their liking for importance. Now, the other thing just to remember, and this applies across all of the behavioural preferences to anybody in any type of communication, is to be aware of the communication preferences of the person you're speaking to and choose the words which they identify with. So, for example, with an ever-ready preference, words such as important, speed, efficiency, achievement, result are all words that will hit home to somebody who has a higher ever-ready preference. If you are ever-ready yourself and the workload has to be completed by you, then you'd need to focus on what is important about this work. Find the reasons why it's worthy of your time. What could you actually gain from doing it? And we might need to go beyond that initial knee-jerk thought and look deeper into it. Can it help you get you seen and noticed by more senior leaders? Will it give you valuable experience? Will it look good on your CV? So you need to really kind of dig down deeper beyond that kind of surface to find what's in it for me. How can I align this to the things that I value that are worthy of my time? So our next behavioural preference is we call the ray of sunshine. Ray of sunshine is a creative problem solver. They're drawn to the things that are new and novel. They get bored quite easily and want to move on to the next project or idea. They need to have people around them to interact with, to bounce ideas off, and they love having a bit of banter, a bit of fun. They feed from other people, off other people. They're openly enthusiastic and upbeat. They need to be at the centre of things. And they like to be different. They like freedom, and they like to be where there's a source of energy, where other people are energised around them. So again, thinking about the high workload. Again, if you could just pop in chat, what do you think it is about having a high workload that might be stressful to a ray of sunshine? What could be the real source of stress, do you think? Yeah, absolutely. Things coming through there. Brilliant. Yeah, perfect. So, ray of sunshines and high workloads. Well, exactly as with the ever-ready, the real source of stress is not the high workload, but it's that perception, the thoughts around their freedom, that they're going to get tied down. That freedom, the flexibility that they thrive on is being taken away from them. It's like they feel they're having their wings clipped, that they'd perhaps be under close scrutiny. People will be monitoring what they were doing. And other thoughts they could have around the work itself, and thinking that they'd get bored possibly. There's so much of it to be done and it would be boring and mundane and monotonous. There also may be some concerns and thoughts and worries around the fact that they would have very limited opportunities for interaction and banter with other people. And that fun and creative element of the work may be taken away or restricted. So again, some of the personalised coping strategies, and of course these are just examples that I'm kind of giving you, the very generalised. If we were doing this and you had your own behavioural profile, we'd be actually looking at these to come up with a very personalised strategy for you as an individual. But if you manage a ray of sunshine, you need to keep them close to the energy for the project and work. And when briefing them about the project or talking to them about the work, you need to show your enthusiasm and your energy for the work. Let them know how much you value their input and their fresh approach and creative approach that they could actually bring to the work. Give them as much freedom and flexibility as possible. Let them decide where, when and how they will actually do the work, if that's possible. If it's a large piece of work, a large project, and it's perhaps complex, break it down into smaller chunks. And if possible, just feed them the work 1 or 2 chunks at a time. If you're a ray of sunshine yourself, then again, to move away from those unhelpful and stress-causing thoughts, start to refocus your thinking and think about how could you ensure that you can still find some time for interaction and banter with others. Where could you actually do the work? What type of environment would provide a workspace that's upbeat and fun? Now, I appreciate under current lockdown situation, it may be a little bit difficult, but often actually working in a public space, a coffee shop, for example, can be quite energising. And also, what are the opportunities that exist for creativity? Can you actually find a new, a different, perhaps an even quicker way of doing the work? Focus on the things that fit your own behavioural preference. So our third behavioural preference style is what we call Carey and the Harmonisers. Carey is a very caring, loyal team member who likes to help other people, values relationship. They're driven by that need for fairness and equality, and people take priority over tasks. It's very much about relationships. They don't like lots of kind of sudden changes. They don't like to feel they're letting people down. They try and avoid confrontation because they're always wanting to strive for harmony. They're very kind of laid back, tolerant type of individuals. So again, a high workload. What do you think could be some of the real sources of stress for somebody who has a higher Carey preference, Carey and a Harmoniser's preference? Again, please type your answers in chat. I'll give you a moment to do that. Yeah, some brilliant ones there. Confrontation, feeling others' upsets. Work and mean caring is minimised, unfair, impersonal, lack of concern for people, conflict. Yeah, everything too fast, not enough time to look after others. Absolutely, that whole kind of people thing. So, for Carey, some of their unhelpful thoughts will be driven by their own thoughts of self-doubt, that they may not be able to cope, that they may end up letting other people down. They'll be concerned about their colleagues, their clients, their managers. They'll be concerned that they might not actually cope and let those people down. If they don't get the work completed on time, who will they be letting down? If they're working from home, the separation from other team members will be amplified in their thoughts, as their thoughts will be around, what if they get stuck? If they have a problem, there's no one to turn to for help. They can't just turn to the colleague sitting across the way from them. They may also have thoughts around the fairness of the situation. Has the work been shared out fairly? Is everyone doing their fair share of the high workload? They may even start to question, is it because they are very helpful? They don't ever say no. So is there an element that actually people are turning to them, they're getting more than their fair share of the workload? Obviously, these thoughts, again, very personal, individual to the person itself and their situation. So if you manage a colleague who is a carer, has a carer preference, the best way of helping them in this type of situation with a high workload is to, first of all, remind them of their many strengths and talents and what they actually bring to the work. Reassure them that they are very capable, more than capable of doing the work, and you have every confidence in their ability. Check in with them on a fairly regular basis. Now, this isn't checking up, this is checking in. Just, to reassure them that they're not alone, let them know that they're doing a great job. If they send you something to check or a piece of completed work, try and acknowledge it or get back to them as soon as possible. If you keep them waiting, then this could possibly lead to their mind going into overdrive and they start thinking that there's something wrong with the work, or have they upset you in some way, annoyed you for some reason. And again, it could trigger and be that real source of stress as this kind of self-doubts and thoughts about letting you down actually start to kick in. It's important to reassure them and let them know how the work is being distributed, and let them be reassured that everybody is doing their fair share of the additional workload. Don't always assume that they'll know who to contact if they've got a problem. Make sure they're fully aware and feel confident what to do if they should have a problem, and especially if they're dealing with new technology that they're perhaps not as confident with. Who could actually help them in that kind of situation? If you yourself have a preference for the caring, the harmonisers behavioural style, you'll need to think about how you're going to change your thinking and focus actually more on the importance of self-care. How by looking after yourself and prioritising your own needs will mean that you can then actually be in a far better place to help and support your colleagues and contribute to that overall team effort. Remind yourself of all the great work and the things that you've achieved in the past. Think about your strengths and your talents and how you can contribute to the team. One of the things with the carer preferences, they like familiarity. So think about the similarities in the work, the things that you've done previously to the work that you're now being asked to do. It may at first appear to be very different, but the likelihood that when you actually really stop and think about it and look at it, there's actually quite a lot of similarity between the previous work that you've been involved with. And the last thing is take the time out to telephone colleagues for that quick kind of catch up. It just helps to reassure you you're not on your own, that other people are having similar kind of thoughts, and just share ideas of how are you getting on with the work. But it just helps to reassure you that you're not alone. Our fourth behavioural style we call Mr. Huey Blue. Mr. Huey Blues like structure, organisation. They're driven by the need for correctness and perfection. Their reputation is very important to them and they will protect it at all costs. They like detailed information and tend to work in a very methodical and sequential manner. They like to focus on one task at a time and take as long as it takes to do it correctly before moving on to the next task. They tend to follow the procedures to the letter and are often regarded as having very high standards of work because they follow the procedures, they follow the rules. So for the last time, let's have a look, think about a Mr. Huey Blue this time, who has a high workload. What could be some of the real sources of stress in regards to having a high workload? Again, if you want to share that in the chat for me, that would be brilliant. Yeah, so we've got things coming through there now. Time pressures, multiple tasks, missing details, overwhelm, people changing things halfway through. Absolutely. Poor standards. Not in clarity. Absolutely. So the unhelpful thoughts then of a Mr. Huey Blue preference. Thinking that other people don't appreciate or understand the time it takes to complete a task correctly, and feeling that they haven't been given that sufficient time in which to complete the task, the work, to that correct kind of standard. Lack of structure with regard to the clarity of the prioritisation of the tasks. Their thinking is that they don't have a clear, predetermined starting point or a sequential order for actually completing the work. Everything's on a tight deadline. Everybody needs everything at the same time. So they need some clarity around. Thinking that what is being expected of them is not right. Or in some cases even, they might even have resentful thoughts that they're having to put right everybody else's mistakes because nobody does it as well as they do. Nobody pays the same amount of attention to detail. Other people do substandard work. Worrying about not being able to give full attention to one job at a time and completing a task before moving on to the next one. Again, these are some of the kind of just a few insights into the thinking behind the stress, the real source of stress. So if you manage Mr. Huey Blue, when allocating the workloads and tasks or during your regular check-ins, discuss and agree the prioritisation of the tasks. Ensure they know which task they should focus upon first and have a clear starting point, but also a clear kind of sequence for the order of priority of the tasks or the order that they should work on them. Be prepared to be flexible and negotiate the timeline for completion of tasks. Give time to listen to their reasoning and explanation of why they need the time that they believe that they need. And then that's where the negotiation can come in. Make sure they have all the information they believe, not you, they believe they need in order to do the work. And if it's not available, let them know either when it will be available or where they can actually find it and access it. Whilst you may not want to encourage colleagues being in contact with you all day, every day, it's important that Mr. Huey Blue feels safe in the knowledge that if they should have a major issue which is going to hold up or delay the work, that they can then advise you of the situation and that you will take any necessary steps to help with the situation if possible. So perhaps they're being held up by a colleague and perhaps Mr. Huey Blue has tried to actually chase up that information, but they're not getting a response. They're just hitting a brick wall, let's say. They want to know that you will then either possibly intervene on their behalf or actually have a discussion about revising the completion date. Because their real worry and concern here is that they actually want to be reassured that their reputation is not going to be dented by the actions of other or inactions of other people. If you yourself are Mr. Huey Blue, then you might need to be a little bit more flexible with your thoughts. Be open to negotiation about timelines and prioritisation of tasks. Don't wait to be given information that you need. Ask for that direction. Ask for the clarity. Ask for the information or where you can find and access that information. You may need to revise your thoughts and be more accepting that other people have different priorities and pressures, and their priorities and pressures might conflict with some of yours. So it's about having that flexibility and being willing to negotiate again. and stop focusing and thinking about the actions of other people and what they are either doing or not doing correctly, incorrectly. Focus your thoughts on doing your own best work and what do you need to do. So drop that bone about thinking about substandard work of others and what the other people are up to. Spend your time thinking about the work that you are doing. So we've now looked at each of the 4 behavioural preferences and gained a little bit of insight into the real causes of stress for them in relation to having a high workload. And as we've seen, it's not about the volume of work. In reality, it's about the real source of stress is about their individual thoughts around and how they perceive that actual workload, which is then underpinned by their behavioural preferences and those drivers underlying those behavioural preferences. So we can go through similar thought processes with all the surface stressors and dive deep down to the root cause of the real sources of our stress. Of course, we can still use some of the common stress relieving strategies to help us manage and alleviate some of the symptoms of stress. So things, your headaches, irritability, poor sleep, then if you're experiencing those, then there's definitely a place for perhaps meditation, exercise, relaxation, breathing exercises, distraction techniques, hobbies, reading, listening to music, talking to people within your support network. There is definitely still a place for those. But those approaches are actually what I call the sticking plaster approach, because they help to manage and alleviate the symptoms we experience in the here and now. So they're very helpful for the here and now, for the stress that you have, the symptoms you're experiencing right here and now. But it is a far more reactive approach, and the effects of it are much more short-lived because the symptoms do tend to return. However, when we focus and start to focus on the real source of our stress, our own unique thoughts, then we can stop managing our stress so much and start doing more of eliminating stress or distress, the bad stress from our lives. As I say, we still need the good stress, but the bad stress, the distress, we can work to start and eliminate the bad stress from our lives. It does require fundamental shifts in the way that we think, but it is the key to actually living a happy and healthy, fulfilling, productive kind of life, to help us to kind of stress less and smile more in this rapidly evolving, complex and very uncertain world that we're kind of living in at the moment. Obviously, within the confines of a 50-60 minute kind of webinar, then I can do nothing more really than give you just a little bit of an insight and a glimpse into how by shifting your thoughts can have a huge implication for your well-being. So what next? Well, in a moment I will take some questions. If there are any questions, please pop your questions in the questions and answer box. I see there's one in there that I'll come to in a moment. But the first step towards this strategic shift is to generate insights into our own behavioural preferences and the way we perceive the world around us. From there, we can then start to understand the drivers of our thoughts and develop our own unique coping strategies by creating these fundamental shifts in our thinking. There are several ways that you can actually learn more and delve deeper into your behavioural preferences and generating a strategic shift in your thinking. On the 23rd of February, I'm actually doing a virtual workshop. Some of the details on screen, and we'll email them out. There's a link on screen if anybody wants to kind of copy that, where you can actually get more detail and book on the the workshop if you would like. And that actual session, there is a charge for it, but it's a 3-hour workshop, live workshop. You will complete your own behavioural profile in that time, and we'll be building on the things and delving deeper into what we've been talking about today. And then there's a 30-minute coaching session, a follow-up session for everybody after that. Or you could book a one-to-one coaching, an online coaching session with myself. 60 minutes coaching session, again, completing your personal behavioural profile, and we'll focus in on developing some real personal coping strategies for yourself based on your behavioural profile. I've got a couple of slots next week actually for free 30-minute consultations, and the slots are Tuesday at 3:30 and Thursday at 11:30. If anybody would like to book onto one of those slots, please, you can just drop me an email. My email's at the bottom of the screen, or if you'd like to talk to me about any of the kind of the coaching or the workshop or becoming a licensee of the Jigsaw so that you can use it within your own business, or if you're a consultant, you can actually use it within your consultancy business. There's also blogs and articles we've published in the future. There's a new website that we're building at the moment, which will have a dedicated behaviour matters blog on it. And there's the monthly webinars that we do as well, which we will be doing throughout this year as well. So lots of opportunities to interact with us, come along, get involved with us, have conversations with us, by all means, talk to us. And now I will thank everybody for attending, and I will look and see if we have any questions.